everyone, thank you so much for joining me today. So in today's card making video, we're going to be using this gorgeous quad of embossing powders from WOW. This is the citrus quad inspired by Seth Apter. It is absolutely gorgeous. And we're going to be using some fun stencil techniques as well. So these are swatches of those embossing powders. We've got tomato, rusty, kiwi gold and olive, and they're absolutely gorgeous. They've got flecks of clear embossing powder in and texture, so they're really great for mixed media. I'm going to be using this big word stamp set from WOW and also the Dancing Smoke stencil, and that's how we're going to create our background. So I'm going to emboss with this stencil. So I've got my Sizzix Big Shot machine and I'm using the extended platform, so I've got it on tab 1. And I'm lining up some card over my stencil, and then I'm using the rubber mat and the impressions pad, and I can just run that through my Big Shot machine, and then you get this beautiful textured background. And you can do this with any of your stencils, so it's a great way of getting another use out of all of those stencils as well. So next I'm just going to add some embossing powder to some scraps of white cardstock. I'm mixing the olive and the rusty here just so that I get different tones, because I'm going to die cut some leaves out of this. I normally like to emboss my die cuts afterwards, just so that you don't get any cracking of the embossing powder. However, I'm using lots of smaller dies today, and so it's a lot easier just to heat emboss a panel, and you can see the gorgeous texture there in that embossing powder. So I love the fact that there's clear flecks. There's also some kind of shimmery bits as well, so there's a little bit of sparkle, and yeah, it just really, they're gorgeous powders. So again, I'm just adding the other colours now to these scraps, and then we can heat set those. You can just put all the excess back in the pot. You really don't actually use that much embossing powder when you're doing things like this, so don't be afraid to use your powders, and they do last a really long time. Again, I'm just going to heat set from underneath just so that I don't lose any of those flecks of clear powders and the chunky bits and the sparkly bits. We want to make sure that we get really good coverage here. And I always find that heat setting from underneath means that you get a much smoother coverage of the embossing powder as well. Sometimes when you heat set from the top, you kind of lose some of the powder and then you end up with gaps. So yeah, it's a good little technique to heat set from underneath. And yeah, look at those powders. They're really, really gorgeous. So there's all of our panels made. So now we can go ahead and die cut. So I've already die cut all of those elements off camera, and I'm just going to work on my arrangement of these as well. These colours, they're so bright and summery. They worked really well with this floral die set. This is an older one from Paper Discovery from Craft Stash in the UK. But I'm sure you've all got flower dies in your stash that would work great for this. Before I stick anything down, I'm going to go ahead and stamp my sentiment, and I'm going to stamp the hello sentiment in that top right hand corner. Because I've already embossed that panel, I am going to use my stamping platform, and I've got a Sizzix sticky grid in there that's just holding that in place. I'm going to do it a couple of times just so that I get good coverage, but of course you could stamp your sentiment before you emboss, so I would recommend that particularly if you use an embossing folders, because you do get a much deeper impression, or if it's a really detailed stencil then you may lose some of the stamping by stamping it afterwards. So yeah, but I got away with it here because it's nice clean lines and I don't have a really deep stenciled impression. I've added it to a matte layer of red cardstock, and I'm just going to attach that down to my A6 card blank, and I'm just going to add some quick grab glue to the back of all of those elements, and we can stick them down in the arrangement that I'd kind of worked out earlier. So I like to just add a bit of glue. You don't want to cover all the elements in glue. I actually think that when there's a little bit sticking up from the card, it adds a little bit of dimension and a little bit of extra interest. And then for the final flower, I'm adding a little bit of foam tape, a little bit of liquid glue just so that I've got a bit of wiggle room if I need it. And then I'm going to add that lovely little bee that's die cut from some gold metallic cardstock and attach him in the top left corner as well. So this is the card. It's almost finished, but just to step it up a little bit, I'm going to add a few little clear water drop gems just so that it finishes off the card nicely. I think it's all these little touches that really do make a card, and it does just step it up from something quite simple to something a little bit more elegant. So that's the finished card for today when I've finished arranging all of those little gems. As always, thank you so much for joining me. Please don't forget to hit that thumbs up button if you've enjoyed this tutorial, and I really hope that it's given you some inspiration of ways to use your embossing powders with your die cuts, and also a closer look at the new embossing powders from WOW. As always, all the products that I've used will be linked in the description box below, and I'll look forward to seeing you in the next video. Take care.